at time. It's 7:01 actually. So I'm going to call this meeting to order and just anyone to start. Great. And let everybody know, if you didn't hear that, we are recording this meeting. So everyone's aware. I haven't noticed whether Lydia is here yet, but we've got a good set of legislators. And I think before we get into any of the other legislators, just to let you know, I'm going to recognize Senator Chloe Maxmin first, who needs to run off to other things. Oh, and Eloise Vitelli just showed up too. All right. So I'm going to give the floor to Chloe. I know you have to run off, and I appreciate your squeezing us in, and to give us a quick update on this last legislative session.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. This is the first vacation week I've taken since, I think, 2017. And so I just was out of state visiting some friends. And so I apologize for my short appearance tonight, but I really wanted to get on and say hello to everybody and just give a little bit of an update on my bills in the session. And I know that all the other Lincoln County legislators and elected officials will do an amazing job of filling you in on what's happening. So the session has kind of come to an end. We're going back on Monday, the 19th, to attempt to override some of the vetoes and to also vote on the ARPA, the federal COVID rescue money budget. I know there was a briefing on that tonight, but I missed it. So I bet other legislators can fill you in on that one. For some good things and some, I think there'll be general frustrations all around with how the money is being spent. But I know there is a lot of good stuff in there. On my end, I had 13 bills in this session. 2 of them died for righteous and good causes. 1 got carried over to next session. 2 are waiting for funding. Sorry, 2 got carried over, 2 are waiting for funding, and that leaves, I think, 7 that have been signed into law, which I'm really excited about. I've just been so blessed this session to work with so many incredible advocates, from substance use disorder to transportation access. I'm doing a bill with the labor unions. I have my list right here because I knew I would forget some of them. Semi-open primaries, oversight of elder care, in-home treatment, decarbonizing our schools. I did one with DA Irving and the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office around, oh my gosh, what's it called? Oh no, I'm still in vacation mode.
Alternative sentencing program, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Alternative sentencing programs. I also had one in to kind of make sure that Mainers going forward won't have to deal with the windfall elimination provision that got signed into law. And one of the ones that got funded, which is very Lincoln County specific, is some money for the Francis Perkins homestead. So the state of Maine is an official partner in that homestead and making sure that it will be open and accessible to the public. I think it's been, a really challenging session overall. The Zoom committee process was necessary because of COVID, but I think created some distance in communication that really hampered relationships across the aisle and in the party. And it's been really nice to be back in the State House. We're unmasked in the State House now to really rebuild those relationships. And also so great to see so many citizens come to the State House and have their voices heard in the halls, which I imagine must be a very kind of intimidating and tough process, but I hear that folks have a really good time doing it. I think that since we're in a Democratic trifecta now, I think there are some really legitimate conversations to be having about our party and where we're headed, and allowing space for different theories of change and different identities within our party. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think that's a conversation that I think really needs to be had within the Democratic Party, especially in leadership in the political space of Augusta. I think there's been, I've also had some amazing bipartisan experiences working with my colleagues across the aisle that have just really given me hope for the kind of conversations that we can be having and the kind of policies that we can be working on moving forward with really strong support that feels more representative of our communities. And so yeah, the last few weeks of session were just also a lot because we weren't in person a lot because of COVID, a lot of the bills got crammed into the last few weeks, and it was a lot. And there were a lot of bills happening every single day. It was very hard to keep up with. And so I've just been telling folks, if you have any questions about what was voted on or its status or any of that kind of stuff, please feel free to reach out. It wasn't as easy to keep track of everything as it was last session. And so I might not have the answer off the top of my head, but I'm so happy to walk you through it and dig into that bill and where it's at. So I can stop there. I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but like I said, I know the other elected officials are gonna do an amazing job.
Okay, so questions, anyone? I've got one quick question. I'm wondering what, other than the kind of our party figuring out what some important things would be, what do you have you're hoping to accomplish also in the next session?
Yeah, next session I have three, potentially four bills that still need some advocacy work. So one of them is the semi-open primaries bill, which passed the House and the Senate, but has not gotten funded yet. So I've gotten a promise it will get funded in 2022, and I'll be working really hard to make sure that happens. And another bill that was carried over, that the one that I'm working with the labor unions on, that is trying to create basically an incentive model for good practices in the renewable energy industry if you have good labor standards. And so I'm excited to work on that one. And then there's two incredible Lincoln County citizens, Michelle Hinken and Andy Burt, are pioneering the Pine Tree Amendment movement, which is a bill that I've sponsored that would create a constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. I carried it over until next year, so we'll need 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate to vote for it, and then it will go to the people for a referendum. You're going to actually see a constitutional amendment this November on the ballot for a right to food, so we're complementing that with a right to a clean and healthy environment. So I'm really excited about that. It's truly like a Lincoln County born effort, and we'll be working really hard this fall and winter to line ourselves up for a good vote in the second session.
Great. Okay. Are there other questions? Yes.
Yes. Quick question. Our Power Maine, the governor's veto message just reiterated that what I think isn't true, that the bill was rapidly done, it wasn't thought through. Neither of those are true. And I'm concerned that the governor is going to undercut her reelection campaign by the message she's giving on that. Because I know I support the referendum. And I think, we got to support the governor and get her reelected, but we need that bill too.
Yeah, I think your analysis is spot on, Bruce. That is an analysis that has been echoed in our caucus. I know it's been communicated to the governor and her office. I think it, we're all shocked and saddened that she vetoed 1708. She's also been vetoing some other incredibly important bills that are quite heartbreaking, all of the work that has gone into them. And it's been heartbreaking a little bit too, because I think we've had a chance to build some of that into our budget work, but we haven't. And so I think there's just there's a whole bunch of things that are vetoed that shouldn't have been. And I think I heard someone say veto letters are rarely accurate. I don't agree with her analysis. I don't think many of us do. And I don't know, we'll attempt to override it next week, but it's just also such a shame because it should go to the people. It's so disappointing when legislators get in the way of folks, of Mainers having their voices heard. So I don't know.
Do what we can.
Yeah, exactly. It's complicated, but I think your analysis is very wise.
Take care.
All right. Thank you. And anyone else with a question? Got just a few more minutes. Natasha.
I just wanted to say thank you to Senator Maxmin for sponsoring LD. Is it 957? No, I forget. No,
It is 957. Yeah. Good memory.
For the alternative sentencing program that both Sheriff Brackett and I had asked, and Rand Maker, the chief deputy, had asked, and it gives folks an alternative to jail when they're at the point where that's how we can, from our perspective in law enforcement, hold them accountable. So I really want to applaud Senator Maxmin for going to bat for us on that, and for for folks up and down our district that need an alternative to jail. But they need to be held accountable. They need something that's more that builds people up. And so to have a senator, to have my state senator be that kind of person is makes me really proud and happy. But I'm very grateful. And so is the sheriff's office. So is Sheriff Brackett. Maybe he's here, but if he's not, then I think I can speak for him on this.
That's so kind, Natasha. It also would not have happened without you patiently explaining to the Judiciary Committee how the process works.
Great. Anyone else? Questions? Well, then I guess we'll let you get back to the visiting friends and family that you are spending vacation time with, and hope you have a wonderful evening. Oh, there is.
Thank you, everybody.
Don't know who's best to answer. Is fully funding. This actually might be a good question for our next speaker. Thank you, Chloe. Can we have a quick round of applause, folks? Anne's work. All right, thank you. Enjoy your time away.
Thank you.
Bye. Our next speaker is Senate Majority Leader. It'd be a great pleasure to say that. Majority Leader Eloise Vitelli, Senate District 23. We share one community. We're actually getting a great deal for our buck here on with one town, Dresden, and we have the pleasure of our Senate Majority Leader.
Well,
welcome,
Chris,
Melody.
it's delightful to see you again, even if you're in this little box. For those of you who don't know, Chris and I served together on my first term in the Senate when I replaced my predecessor, Seth Goodall. Chris and I were seatmates in the Senate, and it was great fun to be there, and glad to see you again tonight, and some other familiar faces as well from Lincoln County. I've said this, I think, before. I started my career in Maine by living in Newcastle. So actually, even farther before that, I was in Jefferson when I was a child. So Lincoln County is also a part of my Maine home. So happy to be here with you tonight. And I want to start by saying that Chloe, as a freshman senator, I know wasn't new to the legislature as a whole, but she had a very successful session given her the bills that she introduced. They were a variety of bills. She gave you a flavor of that. A number of them made it through the process. Some of them are still in process, but I think she can be very proud, and we're very pleased with the work that she's done in her first year as a state senator, and a tough year at that. It was challenging for all of us to do this work remotely for the most part, and then at the Civic Center when we finally came together as a full body to vote on bills, and then finally back at at the State House where we could actually be together and be in our seats and walk the halls, and as Chloe said, also be there with the citizens that we're here to serve. So all in all, a challenging year, but I think in my view, I think a fairly successful one in terms of all that we were able to accomplish for the Maine people. And I'll maybe get to some of that, but I do want to highlight some of the bills that I sponsored and am also very proud of. The primary one is LD 1622, which is a bill to establish the Maine Retirement Savings Program. Sometimes it's called the Work and Save. I work very closely with AARP and a number of other organizations to get this through. This was my actual 4th time on this bill. So I use this as an example of how sometimes it takes a while to get across the finish line. But this bill allows people who work for many of our small companies, businesses, or who are self-employed to save for retirement. There are some 60,000 or more people in the state who have no retirement savings. Too many of our Maine citizens rely only on Social Security in their what's supposed to be their golden age. And so this will create an easy way for them to, with their help of their employers, to set aside money into a Roth IRA for their retirement. It's opt-out, it's automatic, which is what the research says works and has people save. I can say that for myself. I'm retired now and have the benefit of a retirement income because it just happened. I didn't have to think about it. So I'm just thrilled beyond belief, really, that this bill finally made it through. The governor has signed it, and we're going to start working on getting the retirement savings board in place so that people have this option going forward. So that was, I consider that my priority bill going in, and it's the one I'm most proud of coming out of this session. The other one that I'll mention is something else that I've worked on a while, and Chris, you were also inspiring to me, and this one is the local foods bill. This is a bill, again, that built on something that we've done previously that encourages local schools to buy from local farms by giving them matching funds and by encouraging them with a liaison person so that they can connect with their local food producers. And we expanded it this time to include, protein so that they can get more than just produce. They can get eggs, they can get milk, they can get cheese, yogurt, tofu. I think there's a tofu grower somewhere in Lincoln County, and fish. So I felt very good about that one as well. The governor has signed that also. And that was something that I was inspired to do in part through my work with Chris in food. Well, I'm losing the term here. Chris, you'll have to help me out. Not food pantries, food producers.
Yeah.
Kitchens. Yeah, anyway, we worked on this issue and then I talked to a lot of my local farmers and they convinced me that they could produce more if there was more demand. So this is a way to help create more demand for their food from our local farmers. So that's another one. I also worked to pass a bill to set goals for energy storage. Again, this goes back to you, Chris. You were one of the first ones to talk to me about renewable energy and solar, and you explained the whole process project in Booth Bay. And so it's really hooked me on this whole area of renewable energy. I've sponsored a solar bill previously. This time, as a member of the EUT committee, I worked on a bill to set some goals for storage, because if we're going to use renewable energy, wind and sun, you've got to have times to store the energy because their sources are intermittent. So that also was successful going through this time. So I'm looking forward to working with the Governor's Energy Office and Efficiency Maine Trust to get that implemented going forward. Couple other bills. I'll just mention one that's connected to Lincoln County, and it's my one bill that did not get through. It got killed fairly early on, but I also noticed that Representative Hepler is on, and she was a co-sponsor of this bill, and that was inspired by somebody who owns property in Dresden to allow open air cremation in the state. It got sort of some attention as a Viking funeral pyre kind of concept. The woman who brought the idea to us, however, was very thoughtful about why she wanted to offer this as an option. And I was really impressed with the bill, with the hearing on that bill that was in front of HHS committee. But ultimately, I think, again, as in many areas, you know, you have to first have the education, you have to have the conversation, you have to, you know, talk to people about the idea, and it doesn't always take the first time around. So the committee killed that bill. I talked to the sponsor, or to the constituent afterwards, and she was very appreciative, actually, of having had the opportunity to make her case to committees and to try to respond to their questions. And she's, at least at the time, is saying that she's willing to keep working on it, and then we'll bring it back again. So that's how the process works. You win some, you lose some, and some you just have to keep going at till you get enough support generated to get your idea off the ground. So those are just some specific legislative issues that I've worked on. I think what I'm proud of in terms of our overall achievements as a legislature, and certainly as the Senate Democrats, is the budgets that we've passed. These are astounding accomplishments when you think about it. The aid to education, the 55% that we've been trying to do forever, it seems, is finally going to happen. The help for municipalities in terms of property taxes. The budget is just a real, as they often are, a real statement of our values as Democrats, in that we value our kids, we value our residents, the people in our communities. We've passed some good bills around healthcare. The budgets contain increases for our direct care workers, which is something that I hear an awful lot about in my communities. So I'm very pleased that we're able to do that. Salary increases for direct care workers, also create some career ladders for people. So I think there's a lot to be grateful for in the work that we've done. We had a lot of needs. There's no question. The pandemic highlighted, if you will, some of what's been lacking, some of what the gaps are, some of what the inequities are in our education, in our healthcare, in our broadband accessibility. So I think we've seen what those gaps are, and we've made really good efforts towards filling some of those gaps in the short term, and I think in the long term as well. So I'll stop there. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them, but I think we've we've done some really good work that we can build off of going forward.
And really achieved some results that took a while to get to, but that
Yes.
will be really
Yes.
important to the people of the state of Maine. So do you have any sense of how we'll ensure that that 55% will actually be able to be sustained and benefit property taxpayers?
Well, Chris, there's a saying that one legislature can't bind the hands of the next legislature. So, it's hard to for me to promise anything, except that I think it's going to be very hard for any legislature to go backwards once we've hit that mark. I think that's just, it's in the budget, it's there, and moving backwards is going to take, another horrible tragedy that we don't even want to think about. I think we've raised the bar, and that's where it is.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing, that no legislator would want to be the one saying, let's take that away from towns and schools. Yeah. But I was curious what your take was on that as well. Thank you. We have Marty Fox. Do you have a question?
Oh, a comment. I admire you for passing the retirement bill funding for, or having established it. But I see a problem in that people earning minimum wage are not going to have any extra income. So how can we address that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Marty. And it was brought up at the Bills hearing both this time and the previous time. And what I say to that is a couple things. We have to still address the minimum wage. So there's no way to get around that. Let's keep working on making sure that people are earning a livable wage. But the other thing is, and this comes from my years of experience working for an organization now called New Ventures Maine, that teaches financial management, personal budgeting, basically. And what I learned from that is that when people understand and start thinking long-term, they can save. And I love quoting this one woman who went through one of our training programs who said, I used to think that because I didn't have any money, I couldn't save. But now I know that because I don't have any money, I have to save. So she saw the benefits of saving, even saving a little bit aside a week has some benefits for her, and she did it. And so I've seen that the reality is, in fact, that people who don't have very much money are also very good at managing what they have and willing to set some aside. That's also why it's important that the program is automatic and opt out. So if it just comes out of your paycheck, it's gone before you miss it, in a sense. And yet you can opt out. You can decide, okay, I've got some situations in my life now where I really need that extra $5, $10, $20 in my paycheck and can no longer for time, set that money aside. So I think, you're right to be concerned, but I'm also optimistic. And the data from the state of Oregon, where this program has been up and running for a while now, suggests, in fact, that people do save, even at the lower end of the wage scale.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question? Okay, I don't see any. If you are on just a phone connection, I'm not sure we have any, but it would be *9, I believe, to raise your hand. *6 to unmute yourself. And I guess there aren't any. Eloise, I am really heartened to see a lot of the things that are happening this session, and I can't wait to hear about a few more of them from our other legislators. But reaching 55% is very important for education, but I also note that we are actually going to reach the revenue sharing milestone that we're supposed to as well. And
Yes.
for people that are struggling with the cost of their property taxes, and particularly as home values are being pushed up by all of the in-migration, I think that that's going to be very important. And I hope that people understand just how hard this legislature worked to make that happen. Thank you.
And to really meet our commitment to our taxpayers.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for holding this. And I will sit in for a few more minutes and then I'm going to jump off as well.
All right. Next with Prosecutorial District 6, which is, I always forget what all the counties are, but I think Saginaw, Lincoln, Waldo, and Knox. Is that?
A+, you get an A+ on today's quiz. So. Thank you. Thank you. I have a special guest with me. This is Piper. This was the person that was also the district attorney for 9 months mostly last year. Piper was born on February 4th, and I'm the first woman, the first Democrat to be district attorney in District 6, but I'm the first person to give birth in office. Well, I put my deputy in charge that night, but the first person to give birth while in office of district attorney. So I think that Democrats have something to be proud of, to make sure that we're advancing the cause of women and mothers. And that's what I think a lot of what our party is all about. But a quick update from me as the district attorney in District 6. I ran on a platform to incorporate community-based restorative justice into our system, to divert non-violent offenders into treatment for mental health, substance use disorder, PTSD, et cetera, instead of jail, whenever possible. And then to reallocate those resources into being able to do a better job and a deeper dive, a bigger focus on crimes of violence, domestic violence, and especially take a harder look at sexual assault, and be able to charge crimes of sexual assault in which we believe that a crime was committed, that a victim wants to utilize the justice system, is willing to testify against their rapist, and when we believe a victim, and we have that victim that is willing to testify. We have charged a number of cases in the last 2.5 years now that my predecessors, previously the policy would have been to decline because, for instance, a victim was under the influence of alcohol or drugs at the time, or for instance, it was an acquaintance, and that some activity was engaged in consent or acquiescence. So we've been able to really take I think the ideals of the Democratic Party and put them in play when it comes to vigorously prosecuting sexual assault in our community, and making a stand that we are going to start advocating for survivors of sexual assault. We have been able to really invest in community-based restorative justice. We have used, what I've done is I've used the existing infrastructure of the Restorative Justice Project, which is based out of Waldo County, Maine, based out of Belfast. And I've been able to incorporate their work into our district. Now, they were stationed in Waldo County, and we've been able to really expand quite a bit into Knox County. We are still expanding into Saginaw and Lincoln counties. The work is very thoughtful. We are working together, having monthly meetings. Both I have a personal monthly meeting with a restorative justice practitioner, and in the steering committee that Restorative Justice Project has put together in order to work on administering a grant that they received because of the work. Gesundheit, Piper. Because of the work that we were doing together, memorandums of agreement that we entered into it together, and the commitment of our office and law enforcement to restorative justice in the district, Restorative Justice Project of Midcoast, Maine was able to secure a $1 million grant. And we've been working hand in hand to make sure we are thoughtfully, they are thoughtfully, right, using that money to make real gains in creating basically our community's education, understanding of what restorative justice is. So we have a significant alternative to the punitive, costly criminal justice system that has so failed our communities, especially folks, victims who are low income and have substance use disorder and mental health issues, but also defendants who are committing crimes based on the fact that they suffer from PTSD, substance use disorder, and untreated mental illness, poverty, and homelessness. So we've been able to do some tremendous work. Nobody expected COVID-19, I imagine. I certainly didn't. We didn't expect that to come along, but I think the Democrats can be proud that we had a Democratic administration and that you all helped to put me in this office. As a Democrat, as a person that considers the value of all human beings in our district, we were able to immediately engage in a process to make sure that the folks that we had incarcerated at our county jails that we were responsible for as a people, that the only folks that were incarcerated were folks that were there because they were a significant danger to the community or to their victim. Now, a lot of that work went on prior to the pandemic. That was part of the program, right? Was to utilize jail and punitive measures less and use restorative measures more. But once the pandemic hit, we decided to dig in even further and make sure that we were not sending folks to jails, knowing that overcrowding of jails could be a death sentence. So we used that process only for the folks, again, that posed a significant harm of danger to either their victims or to the general public. And because of that, and that work, I can't be the only one that takes credit for that. Of course, that was a lot of the work of my staff, but also the work of the sheriffs, other law enforcement agencies that worked with us, and the judiciary that worked with us to make sure that we all had that goal of making sure we were not, nobody had a death sentence, basically, or a potential death sentence from being in close quarters and having a COVID outbreak because, for instance, they couldn't pay cash bail, or because they had a short sentence, for a non-violent or non-dangerous offense. So we all worked in District 6 very, very hard. And because of that, we did have 2 outbreaks at the jail. I believe the first outbreak resulted in maybe 3 cases of COVID-19. And the second one, I believe, resulted in about 18 cases of COVID-19. Both were able to be contained almost immediately because we had kept those incarceration levels at the lowest level that was safe for the community. So that work, again, having a Democrat in this office, has made all the difference. And if you look around the state, I think you can be really proud of the work that law enforcement has done. And that is, a Democratic sheriff and a Democratic district attorney and all of the folks that work on these issues, from your local police chiefs to the people, the boots on the ground, to make sure that we were doing right by our communities. So the next steps, what I'm looking forward to is to continuing to expand community-based restorative justice, and to really put an emphasis also on working with police to make sure they're getting the funding, the training they need to have crisis response to mental illness and substance use disorder, so we don't see the types of tragedies we've seen across the country. I think that our community supports our law enforcement officers and our law enforcement agencies that do community-based policing, are incorporating restorative practices, and are meeting people where they are, understanding that substance use disorder and mental illness are not cured by jail and punitive fines and punitive measures. So I think we need to keep applauding and bolstering the good work of law enforcement when it comes to the types of community policing that we want to see. Because we are the future, the Democratic Party, in my opinion, our ideals, and the work that we've done and the work we want to keep doing around community policing is a solution to problems that we see both in our communities and around the country when it comes to inequality with race and gender in the criminal justice system and in policing. So that's why I'm running for re-election in 2022. And you'll all be seeing more of me and Piper, and probably my daughter Marin are also on the campaign trail, because we think that those are ideals that are really worth fighting for. So we're going to keep doing it. And so I'll open it up to any questions. I think that was I'm trying to do this in a nutshell, but that's what I have on my list of things to cover today.
Great. Questions, folks? Any hands up? I'll show up here. I do have something that someone asked in here about with limited health facilities and programs. Where are people that need mental health treatment housed? There's a related question. Are we hiring additional professionals? Do you know if there's any money that would be able to be put towards that use? And
Yeah, well, this is what I do know. I'll give you a synopsis of what I know. I know, for instance, in Lincoln County, the sheriff and I have asked for funds. We put that as the, our greatest wish for funds that fit in with the COVID relief money that we've received is for mental health crisis support teams or support workers to work embedded with police as a response to mental health crisis. Right now, the picture is extremely depressing. There is a complete lack of mental health funding for folks with severe mental illness. People in our communities who are drastically, severely ill with mental illness and having acute symptoms are often housed at the ER for extended periods of time. Often those folks can be assaultive to staff, and the ERs, and I will say in Lincoln County, have done an incredible job living up to their ideals as medical practitioners. In other parts of my district, I've had ERs kick patients out, for instance, a 14-year-old girl with autism, because she was assaultive to staff, and say, well, shouldn't she be at Long Creek? And our response was, no, she needs to be in medical treatment. And I've been very lucky to enjoy the support of law enforcement in this district that believe the same things I do, that sick people shouldn't be in jail. Now, there are times that people with severe mental illness commit significant crimes of violence. It's few and far between, but it happens. And in those cases, we have had to hold people in the county jails. And luckily, we have, through the Janet Mills administration, we have Randy Liberty as the head of DOC, the Department of Corrections, and he has helped get our folks with severe mental illness into humane options, but they're still carceral, meaning options that are, people in prisons and jails. We need to rethink what we use the criminal justice system for. We need to reinvest money in mental health, including beds for folks so they're not staying in the ER. And I will make, my biggest wish, if I could just create a solution to one problem, would be that there is zero options, zero funding for children's mental health with children that have severe mental illness. And if we had those funds, we had facilities for children with severe substance use disorder and severe mental illness, such that they are a significant danger to themselves and others, Long Creek could be closed safely with a safe alternative for folks to go to. And that's what my juvenile prosecutor begs for every day, is more resources. So we really need to do a better job for children. We do a worse job for children than adults, but we are completely lacking in facilities and funding for severe mental illness. You'll go a little further down the spectrum in the continuum of mental health issues, and we still don't have enough resources, psychiatry, and mental health services for folks who are less severely mentally ill. But we certainly can do a better job for folks in the state. So whoever asked that question, that's a very poignant question, and that's what law enforcement is grappling with on a daily basis.
Thank you. And I'm going to recognize Ron Phillips.
Yeah, hi. Natasha, thank you for what you're doing. So I'm on the board of the Maine Justice Foundation. They deal with civil issues and have a whole network of 6 providers that are providing pro bono legal representation. It's a very complex network, and a lot of needs on that end of the spectrum. But I never quite understand the relationship between civil law and advocacy and representation and public advocacy and the criminal justice system in Maine, and whether there's a potential for a connection between civil and criminal issues, and what the Maine Justice Foundation, which is trying to broaden its mandate on access to justice, might do. So thank you for whatever you can share.
So I want to make sure I understand the question. Do you mean the context of folks with mental illness, or do you mean the context of folks
well, it could be
violence or?
No, it could be, but I'm saying criminal versus civil.
Yeah. So the big, from our perspective in the criminal system, we often say, it's the taxpayers pay the bill to prosecute our cases. Where in the civil arena, other than when you have a pro bono attorney or an organization or somebody that's going to represent you without pay, those are all prosecuted, right, by individuals and attorneys at their own dime. We've tried to make sure in our office that we aren't using the criminal system to punish, to wield against folks where it should be a civil case, because often we've seen in history around the country that sometimes folks with a lot of money, corporations, private, usually private corporations, large private property owners are able to have the state basically prosecute crimes that potentially should be civil. So I think it's important to keep a distinction, but my belief is, for instance, with issues like domestic violence, the state has a huge role to play in holding offenders accountable, but 2/3, 3/4 of our domestic violence cases, victims do not want to use the criminal system, but they would be more open to using a civil system. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And this, as I think a lot of folks know, the criminal justice system can be very difficult to hold offenders accountable, because you need to be able to hold an offender accountable at a very high standard, beyond a reasonable doubt. And when a victim isn't willing to go through that, it's impossible to get a verdict. But in a civil arena, civil, for instance, protection from abuse matters can have a lot of effect, getting survivors of domestic violence child support, and also making sure that there's no contact. So we try to make sure that our victims have access to organizations like New Hope for Women, but an organization like the Maine Justice Foundation is incredible. I know I give a little bit of money when I re-up for the bar every year to the Maine Justice Foundation, because that civil work is really, really important. And I think the more that our prosecutors can be, and our teams of prosecution can be in communication and understanding what civil processes are, what's available to citizens, and then the more investment there is with the state of Maine to use that civil system, I think we could have a big impact on victim safety, and on victims willing to utilize the justice system, whether it's not the criminal justice system, but whether that they could use the justice system to get safety and security for their families. So I think that that's a really big issue, and you and I should probably talk about that.
Thank you.
So there are a couple of more questions, but we're already over our time, and I'm wondering if maybe we should invite you back for
Anytime.
a discussion of some of these issues.
I'd be happy to come back. Let me know, and I'll just put out there my email address, and I can put it in the chat, but it's natasha.irving.da@gmail.com is my campaign address, or my political address. I'm also natasha.irving@maineprosecutors.com. I'll put both the email addresses in. So if anybody had other questions that we can't get around to today, I would be more than happy. This is what I do every day, is what I think about every day. So I love talking about it, I'm sure you can tell. So I'd be happy to put that in the chat, but I'd be happy to come back anytime. You just let me know, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you.
Very much. So we have more legislators, and I don't know if people had caught that and noticed. We also have the executive director of the Maine Democratic Party, Gaetan Davis. And so I'd like to go back to our legislators quickly, of Allison Hepler and Holly Stover, and I don't believe Lydia was able to make it. Is Lydia here and I missed that? Okay, so Holly, Allison, you want to flip a coin, or do either of you have somewhere you need to be that you should be the next? Trying to
actually, I'll just do a couple things that to sort of build on what Natasha said. I worked on a bill that was passed this year, and actually I'm looking at you, Natasha, and you, David Levesque, Access to Justice bill. that's been worked on, I think, for 3 sessions to fund. It's a pilot program that funds primarily young attorneys to serve in underserved areas. It's a pilot program I think it's the Maine Judicial Supreme Judicial somebody, I can't remember what agency will choose these 5 lawyers to serve in underserved areas. And what they'll do is they'll get access to a tax credit. And it'll go for 5 years. It's similar to what has been used pretty successfully in getting dentists to come to Maine and to stay in underserved areas, and also for medical doctors. So I'm really excited about that, and was pleased to be part of that. And actually, it came out of a student law group club at UMaine Law, and so I'm pleased to finally, to be the one to get it over the finish line. So I appreciate that. The other thing, I guess I'll just mention, Chris, since you mentioned municipalities, I wanted to mention something that hasn't been brought up. I was not a co-sponsor, but certainly a supporter of a bill that passed environmental extended producer responsibility, which is going to help towns be able to finance some of their recycling costs. This is a fee that will go on to be passed on to packagers into a fund that will allow municipalities to tap into. I know to cover recycling and solid waste costs. I know in Woolwich, recycling and solid waste is the 3rd most expensive part of our budget. Also related to municipalities, I worked on, it wasn't my bill, but worked with bills about remote meetings, and to be able to continue that for municipalities, that seemed to have worked really well. Actually, what I was able to do at the end was just to slap an emergency preamble on the remote meetings bill, so that towns that have been doing it pretty successfully don't have to wait 90 days to keep it, to reenact it. So I'm really happy about that. I'm losing my light here. Revenue sharing, which I think, as a select person in town, I'm also share that support. Another bill that was vetoed, but I hope to help bring back, was a bill actually pushed by the cable TV folks, including Larry Seidlinger in Lincoln County Cable, that would have really sort of held cable providers feet to the fire in terms of providing services for local cable television. The governor vetoed that, and we were not able to overturn it. Other than that, those are the things that, I also passed, sponsored a brain injury bill that puts people with acquired brain injury into the same category of rights and protections that are currently being offered to people with autism and intellectual disabilities. And I give a big shout out to Holly Stover, who serves on the Health and Human Services Committee, who helped push that along. And other than that, I serve on marine resources and inland fisheries and wildlife, and have been keeping a close eye on, things like aquaculture, right whales, wildlife resources, that kind of thing. So yes, Amanda Silverman from Lincoln County in Dresden was one of the people who helped push the Access to Justice Act. And now she's a district attorney in Holton, I believe. So yeah. So anyway, lots of good stuff.
Great. Questions for Allison?
Yeah, Allison, what was the Access to Justice Act?
Who's asking? I just want to. So it's a bill that would pay up to 5 attorneys who are basically just out of law school to serve as an incentive to serve in underserved areas, and it gives them a tax credit on their, at the end of their income tax. So it's an incentive to try to get more people. The example I use, and I got to think of a different one, but the example I use for why it's important is that you live in a small town in Western Maine, and you're getting a divorce, and there's one attorney in town. I think that poses a poses a problem. I would love to have a more uplifting example for why this kind of thing is needed, but just sort of the basic services for legal help and legal advice. So does that, I don't know who asked the question.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. I know that we've tried to sponsor programs that get more access to justice in rural communities like you're describing for those civil issues. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, thanks to the UMaine Law School students.
Have you done anything about the public defender problem? In fact, the way we currently provide public defenders by paying private attorneys is not really effective. And I was wondering, is there any solution pending on that?
Natasha probably has more experience than I do on that. I do know that in the budget, we funded the Indigent Legal Services program in a much bigger way than it had been funded. Am I right, Natasha?
There's an increase, Allison.
Yeah, okay.
I
Yeah.
serve oversight, so we've been working with that program
Okay.
closely, and they're making some strides and
Okay.
improvement.
Absolutely, and I'll just put in a plug that from my, and I think the other prosecutors, elected prosecutors in the state of Maine, we would really love to see a public defender office in the state of Maine. It's really important. There was a Sixth Amendment Center study that said we really need it in Maine. From my perspective as an administrator, it'd be nice to have another office to reach across to and say, you know, because we would be able to do more diversion, restorative justice, more upstream help for folks before they're charged, if that's the right thing to do. So, and defendants really, we found ourselves sending referrals to the agency that administers the private attorneys, which shouldn't be our role. But when we say, we don't think this defendant is able to contact their attorney, you know, those types of things. So you're absolutely right. And and these legislators understand that. And we have really great advocates at the State House with them.
Allison, is Lincoln County considered an underserved area for, this is David Levesque, under that law?
It was funny that you should say that. It was hard to find numbers of actually how many attorneys were in each county other than, and so I was relying on information that came from either the UMaine Law School or that's a really good question. I'm embarrassed I don't know the answer to, but.
I know the law school looked at, when they had their rural fellows program, looked at population of 10,000 for in any given area. And that may be similar under the law.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Okay, I will.
Thank you
Thanks.
for that.
Okay. If there aren't any further questions for Allison, thank you very much, Allison.
Thanks for doing this.
And Holly Stover.
Hello, everyone. And I think we've covered a lot of ground, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. And that sometimes can be a challenge for me. But given the context of a lot of the conversation we've had, I serve on the Health and Human Services Committee, as you know, and we had 1,000 of the 2,000 bills that were printed, which isn't unusual for us to have half of the bills. And we're a very robust committee.
Oh, Holly, you're muted.
So you missed all of that. Hello.
A very robust committee, you said.
Very robust committee. I serve on the Health and Human Services Committee, where we have half of all of the printed bills. This year we had approximately 1,000 of the 2,000 bills. Many are carried over, not many. We had some carried over, but I want to put it in the framework of the conversation we had around mental health and substance use disorder, because in a more systemic way, one of the issues beyond not having enough services, you have to understand the reason or how we got here, is that we did at one point build a lot of services. In fact, I worked as a regional director for mental health and developmental disabilities and worked on building a lot of those services. And then we had a period of 8 years when Paula Page and particularly Mary Mayhew gutted all those services. They may have existed still within the Medicaid rates, but the rates were gutted. And where we are right now is we have an underfunded system that is on the verge of collapse, or some of it has collapsed. So I would say a bulk of our work during the session on the HHS committee, because for 2 years, the commissioner, who has a daunting task of running the biggest department in state government, has been doing a rate study. But what we saw was a system. When I say system, I mean mental health, substance use disorder, and developmental disabilities, and some other services, particularly for the elderly, all those direct care services. And what we saw was a system that's terribly underfunded, on the verge of collapse, and a rate study isn't going to address the immediate need. So I would say, by and large, with a couple of exceptions, we raised the rates 25% across the board, understanding that the commissioner has committed to raise the rates according to what the rate study has set, but we wanted to set a 25% increase to most all of the Medicaid services in those areas, so that the new base, the new rate, would be set on top of the additional 25%. What I can tell you, that I had one bill, which is LD 1135, and that was to raise the rates 25% for detox, residential beds, and intensive outpatient. And why that's critically important for substance use disorder is, at the point where my bill was being heard and was being passed, Milestone closed their detox beds because they didn't have enough money to stay open. So it isn't just about a staffing issue and service issue. These people have been all terribly underpaid, and it's a system that has been left out, completely left out. There's 2 areas we didn't get to pass, and I hope we see again. One is med management. I think Natasha mentioned psychiatry. Med management is one of the most significant mental health services that people need living in community. And the other is ACT teams. And we can explain ACT teams another time, but it's a fidelity-based model. It works. It cares for the people with severe and persistent mental illness. And they do it in such a unique, it's a blended rate where you have a whole team, including the psychiatrist and nurse, and they see people everywhere. They come to you, and it works. So I hope we revisit med management and ACT teams, but we did restore a lot of services by just raising to that 25% in anticipation that the commissioner will continue to raise those rates so that people may actually get a living wage. And some of the testimony, it isn't just about, it is about people couldn't get the services because the people weren't being paid enough to provide them anymore. We are underbedded. I'll take personal responsibility for that because I say it all the time. When Riverview was built, the steel beams, and I've pointed this out over and over because I was there, the steel beams were put in place so that an addition could be put on. And I'm not saying we need to build another part on that hospital, but we have people stacked up in emergency rooms, children and adults, and with severe and persistent mental illness. And it is unconscionable to me that somebody who needs to be in a hospital bed because they have an illness, you would not do that to a cardiac patient or a kidney patient, but we're doing it to people with severe and persistent mental illness every day. So I'll get off that because I'm pretty passionate and we're running out of time. The other, I think, big deal bill we've talked about before is LD 966, which is the comprehensive full dental benefit under Medicaid. And I think as Mainers, it is something, we did away with that full comprehensive benefit in the state in 1976. And I always say you can tell that it was 1976 if you go around and look in people's mouths who are now aged quite a bit, but they haven't had access to dentistry. And we have Lincoln County Dental. Finally, we're open. We opened in November, but this full comprehensive dental benefit, it also will have a study to look at the outcome of that benefit. And it also will have a planning group that will determine both what's going to tuck in under that comprehensive benefit and then how much we're going to pay for it. The commissioner committed to raise the rates to the median rate of commercial dentistry across the state. We're talking about a substantial change in the way people will be able to have access to dental care in the state. And it is we've talked before about dental, and it really is a predictor of other diseases and one of the most important things we can do for overall health in the state. So I think that bill is one of the things we're having a signing on Monday. So you'll probably see it on the news, and something we should all be very proud of. It was Speaker Fecto's bill, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor. And then the other piece that we passed in the first budget that I wanted to touch on is, having been the state's director for domestic violence and sexual assault for several years. There was never a general fund appropriation set aside for domestic violence and sexual assault. So we relied heavily on the federal grants that we get and will continue to get. But not having that general fund already fixed appropriation has left them at a disadvantage, a funding disadvantage, and that also equates to a service disadvantage. So we were able to pass a 2-year in the last session, the 129th, we passed a bill and we gave $5 million to domestic violence and sexual assault, but that was not a permanent allocation. So when we did the budget earlier in March, we attached that $5 million as a permanent allocation to domestic violence and sexual assault services in the state, which means each of the areas, domestic violence being 1, 2.5, sexual assault 2.5, and now it's permanently placed in our state budget. And again, in this state, you're far more likely to die at the hands of someone that you know that says that they love you than a stranger. And the one thing we know that works is advocacy. And the agencies like New Hope that we have that cover our county, they do God's work. They do God's work. And these services are critical. It doesn't matter what day, whether it's Christmas Day or today, they're there. And I think Natasha can attest to that court advocates have a huge place in helping victims get through the process, but advocates in general and services for victims must continue. And so we're very proud of that $5 million, and I think the providers would agree, because there it is, and hopefully it will stay. I have some other things that I could go on about. The other thing that no one mentioned that I want to mention, because it is probably one of the biggest problems in Lincoln County, is we have no affordable housing. And the county commissioners have talked about it. We've all talked about it, that we had several bills around affordable housing. For whatever reason, we didn't get a lot of traction, but we have a significant problem in this county that we could focus on another day, but we do not have any place for people to live in this county. And I would challenge that we have not seen any significant funding brought to this county to construct a unit of affordable. When I say affordable, I'm talking about subsidized. I say for low wage earners, because they make the world, I would say they make the world go round, because who's going to be at Irving making the coffee at 3 a.m.? But we have a number of people who don't make a lot of money, but they do incredibly important work, like CNAs. And so we have to have affordable housing for people to be able to have a stable roof over their heads and be able to go to work. And I would like to see some of the housing money that is coming through the ARPA funds, and also have more conversations about how we're going to do something in this county that's real. So I'm going to stop, because I know that we have other guests, and I just appreciate you all. Again, in my 3rd year, I appreciate your support as much as I did in the first day. And you folks are what make it, you make it sustainable. You make it so that I can keep going and we can keep going. We're all in this together. So thank you.
So I'm going to invite folks to unmute so we could have thank yous and applause for all of our legislators. And Holly, you brought me to tears over the sorts of situations that we face in Lincoln County that you've done amazing things to turn around. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, so I have, I believe, no legislators left who haven't had a chance to speak. Is that correct? I haven't missed anyone? Okay. And, I've got to say that's is really pretty amazing what they've been accomplishing, what's been getting done in Augusta on all of our behalfs. And thank you so much. Someone
I
who
had one other thing I wanted to mention. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go, Holly.
The one other thing is that I also serve on government oversight. And if you saw the news 2 days ago, we voted and will be moving forward with a full review of the Office of Child and Family Services. I think that we've all seen the news and we know that we've had 4 child deaths. And we know that those are alleged to have happened at the hands of their caregivers. And I think in a state this small and a state this strong that we can do much better. And I can say that because I worked there for 23 years and I think they're incredible people. But we have to figure out what is the systemic issues that are before us. And we have to do that together in a non-blaming but constructive way. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Holly. So next, we have, and it's probably the first time for most of you to meet Gaetan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Gaetan Davis, the new executive director of the Maine Democratic Party. And we've spoken a couple of times. I think you'll all be encouraged by the kinds of ideas and the energy that Gaetan's bringing to this work. But Gaetan, take it away. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Chris, for that that introduction. And I do see a few familiar faces on this call, which is really exciting to see. I will also be brief, seeing as I don't want to, take away from people's evening plans too much. But also recognize that there are quite a few faces on here that I don't recognize. So I'd love to maybe just start off by telling you a little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in Maine, grew up in Brunswick, and currently am living in Portland, where I just bought my first house. And I have been working in the world of Maine politics for just about, I want to say like the past 6 years. And in that time have had the tremendous good fortune to have worked for a lot of incredible candidates and politicians. I started off as a regional field organizer with the Senate Democratic Campaign Committee in York County. I joined Angus King's re-election campaign in 2018 on his fundraising team. Worked in the State House briefly, moved down to DC to join Jared Golden's staff. And then most recently was on Sarah Gideon's race for the US Senate, where I ran her in-state fundraising program. So I'm very new to this role. I started, I think, just about 3 weeks ago. However, that totally blows my mind because it's been a complete whirlwind and a lot of sleepless nights. But I was really fortunate that I got to overlap with Lisa for just about 2 weeks as she was transitioning out. So I had a really, I think, unique opportunity to learn from her. And I don't want to say hit the ground running, but I definitely have some information under my belt on my first day, which I really appreciated. And I also am so fortunate because I have 2 incredible people kind of guiding the ship. Drew is someone who I have actually known my whole life. He and my dad worked together many years ago. And Bev is someone who I am just meeting, but completely adore. And just have a tremendous amount of trust in them and respect for them, and feel like I, could not do this job without their guidance and leadership. I'm very much still getting my bearings and, scheduling a lot of introductory meetings to kind of really get a feel for who the movers and shakers are in this kind of Maine political ecosystem. But, I think it goes without saying that there's a ton of important work that we need to do as Maine Democrats in this state. The Maine Democratic Party has done some really impressive work over the past couple of years in investing in municipal elections and really putting some staff power behind those. They recently partnered with Contest Every Race, as I'm sure you've heard, and are really doing some impressive work there. And I do hope that's a program that we can continue to build upon, because I cannot stress how important that really localized organizing is to the long-term, success of Democrats in our state. 2020 is not going to be an easy year for us. You know, we have a very slim majority in the House of Representatives, and the golden race will be one that is very, very closely watched, as that razor thin majority is on the line. And I think it goes without saying that I cannot stress how important it is that Paul LePage never gets the keys to the Blaine House again, and we will fight like hell to make sure that doesn't happen. And another thing that is really important to Drew, and I could not agree with more, is to really work on ways in which the Maine Democratic Party can really serve as a platform to amplify the incredible work that the legislature is doing, to really show that, you know, Democrats are delivering year in and year out, and these are not accomplishments that we just talk about in an election year. These are things that are happening regardless of when the election cycle is taking place, and really kind of putting a lot of thought into exactly how we can amplify that good work. Because I mean, I think we just heard on this call tonight the incredible stuff coming on in Augusta. So, you know, obviously a lot of work to do. It's just such a pleasure to get to meet you, and I'm sure I will, well, I hope that I get to join many more of these meetings going forward, and maybe meet some of you in person as well. But just really, really excited to be here, and really excited to meet everyone.